The emergency room doors burst open with chaos, blood, shouting, urgency, and yet, somehow, what happened next made the entire room fall into a silence no one could explain. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the hidden strength in people others overlook, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be seen. It was just past midnight in a crowded hospital in Denver, Colorado. The ER was running on fumes, overworked nurses, impatient doctors, and a waiting room filled with restless families. In the middle of it all was a man no one noticed. His name was Samuel Carter, a quiet janitor in his late 50s, with tired eyes and a worn-out uniform that looked like it had seen better days years ago. He moved silently through the corridors, mopping floors, emptying bins, and staying out of everyone's way. To most of the staff, he was invisible. Samuel never complained, even when people left messes behind without a second thought or brushed past him like he didn't exist. Some of the younger staff even joked about him, calling him slow or strange because of how quietly he worked. He never reacted. He simply nodded, kept his head down, and continued doing his job with quiet dignity. That night, everything changed. The doors slammed open again, this time with paramedics rushing in a severely wounded soldier. The man was covered in blood, his uniform torn, his breathing shallow. The words, "Green Beret," were faintly visible on his sleeve. The room immediately shifted into high alert. Doctors shouted instructions, nurses scrambled for equipment, and the air filled with tension so thick it felt suffocating. The soldier's name was Nathan Briggs. He had been involved in a classified training accident nearby, and whatever had happened, it was bad. His body bore signs of trauma that most of the ER staff rarely saw. His pulse was erratic, his oxygen levels dangerously low. Every second mattered. Samuel stood in the corner, quietly holding a mop, watching the scene unfold. No one paid him any attention. Why would they? He was just the janitor. But Samuel's eyes were different that night. Focused. Alert. Almost familiar with the chaos. As the doctors worked frantically, something unexpected happened. Nathan Briggs, barely conscious, suddenly stiffened. His eyes flickered open just enough to scan the room. For a brief moment, everything slowed. Then, with what little strength he had left, he turned his head toward Samuel. And then it happened. Despite his injuries, despite the pain, the soldier's body instinctively snapped into attention. It wasn't perfect, his condition wouldn't allow it, but the intent was unmistakable. His hand trembled as it tried to rise in salute. The entire room froze. No one understood what they were seeing. Why was a highly trained Green Beret, on the brink of death, trying to salute a janitor? Samuel dropped the mop. The faint clatter echoed in the stunned silence. His posture straightened in a way no one had ever seen before. The tired, invisible janitor seemed to transform in an instant. His eyes locked onto Nathan's, and something unspoken passed between them, recognition, respect, history. Samuel stepped forward, his movements calm but commanding. For the first time, people moved aside for him without questioning it. There was something in the way he carried himself now that demanded it. Without raising his voice, he gave a few precise instructions. The tone wasn't loud, but it carried authority, real authority. The kind that comes from experience, not position. One of the doctors hesitated, confused, but something in Samuel's presence made him listen. Samuel pointed out a subtle issue in Nathan's breathing pattern, something the team had overlooked in the chaos. He suggested an adjustment, quick, specific, and critical. The lead doctor, Dr. Rebecca Hayes, frowned for a moment, then nodded reluctantly. They made the change. Within seconds, Nathan's oxygen levels stabilized slightly. A ripple of disbelief spread through the room. Who was this man? Samuel didn't linger. He stepped back as soon as the team regained control, his face returning to its usual quiet expression. He picked up his mop again as if nothing had happened. But nothing was the same anymore. Dr. Hayes approached him later, her curiosity overpowering her skepticism. She asked him how he knew what to do, how he noticed something so specific under pressure. Samuel hesitated. For a moment, it looked like he might brush it off. But then he sighed. He told her a story he hadn't shared in years. Before he was a janitor, Samuel Carter had been something else entirely. Decades ago, he had served as a highly respected military commander, leading special operations units through some of the most dangerous missions overseas. He had trained soldiers like Nathan Briggs, men who operated in silence, in shadows, where every decision meant life or death. But war leaves scars that don't always show. After losing several men under his command during a mission that went wrong, Samuel carried the weight of that failure with him. He left the military, unable to forgive himself. The world he returned to felt unfamiliar, and the man he saw in the mirror was someone he didn't recognize anymore. So he chose a life of quiet. A life where no one depended on him. A life where he could disappear. The hospital job was supposed to be simple. Clean floors, empty bins, no responsibility for lives. It was the opposite of everything he had once been. But that night proved something he couldn't run from. Who he was, never really left. Nathan Briggs survived. Weeks later, after multiple surgeries and a long recovery, he returned to the hospital, not as a patient, but on his own 2 feet. He asked for Samuel by name. When they finally stood face to face again, there was no confusion this time. Nathan stood tall and gave a proper salute, his voice steady as he acknowledged the man who had once trained him, guided him, and unknowingly saved his life again. Word spread through the hospital quickly. The quiet janitor was no longer invisible. The staff who had once ignored him now looked at him with respect, and, for some, regret. Dr. Hayes personally apologized for underestimating him. Others followed. Samuel accepted their words with a simple nod, never holding resentment. But what changed the most wasn't how others saw him. It was how he saw himself. For the first time in years, Samuel realized that his past didn't have to be something he hid from. The pain, the loss, the guilt, it was all real. But so was the good he had done. So was the difference he could still make. He began helping more around the ER, not as a doctor, but as someone who understood pressure, decision-making, and calm in chaos. His presence became a quiet strength the team relied on. And slowly, the man who had once tried to disappear began to live again. Before this story ends, here's something special. Drop a comment below saying, "Respect for the unseen heroes," if you believe people deserve to be valued for who they truly are, not just what others see. As Samuel walked through the hospital one evening, the floors just as clean as always, he noticed something different. People smiled at him. They greeted him. They saw him. But more importantly, he saw himself. Not as a man defined by his past mistakes. Not as someone who needed to hide. But as someone who still had purpose. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like, share, and comment. You never know who around you might be fighting silent battles or carrying invisible strength. Sometimes, the people we overlook are the ones who have the most powerful stories to tell.